guys have gone through obviously the build side of things and architecture. So now I'm going to take you guys on to kind of when you've got the website in place about how we optimize for multimedia and some of the on-page stuff, and as well some content recommendations as well, and how to kind of pull that together. Because at the end of the day, ranking as highly as we can for relevant terms and having page speed as low as possible is going to get us in a position to drive traffic and drive revenue, which is why we're here in the first place. So just to kick things off, I'm just going to talk about optimizing your files. So when we talk about multimedia files, I think majority of you guys will probably pop into your mind straight to imagery. So I thought that was a good place to start, because 95% of these files will be images, and these have a huge weight bearing on your website. So it's great that you guys can have this information and start thinking about how you can optimize those as well as possible. The best place to start really is the Core Vitals update that happened in October last year. If you're not aware of it, it's based on 3 different metrics, which is cumulative layout shift, time to interactive, and largest contentful paint. There's hundreds of blog posts out there, so I'd recommend some further reading if it's not something you're fully aware of at the moment. But essentially what those 3 metrics do is they combine together to create a score based on a user's experience, and page speed plays an absolutely massive part in that. And that's why it's absolutely critical to make sure all your multimedia is considered and compressed as much as possible. Now, considered in terms of, does it need to be on a page? Are you going to really kill the page speed just for an image or a video that isn't really going to do a lot? So you have to think about style versus substance a lot of the time. And from a compression point of view, what we'd like to do is always compress any image that you want to put through your website. So essentially, using various different CMSs, they have built-in image compression already, or if not, there's plenty of third-party tools out there. Squoosh is the one I really like to use. And what that does is essentially drive down as many, hopefully kilobytes, but hopefully not megabytes or gigabytes of these files you're using. But essentially, it will drive them down and make it a compressed version of that file that you'd like to upload. And as you can see on the right-hand side, I've put an example in of an image that has been 80% compressed without absolutely any visual image change to the human eye. So what you're doing is essentially saving yourself a lot of time from a page speed perspective, which is going to help you rank moving forward without losing any quality of the image. So it's something that really needs to be considered, and will really get great results for yourselves and your pages when looking to rank for them. What we would also recommend doing is doing this site-wide. So obviously that's one example there of one image. Now that might only be a couple of 100 kilobytes, but if you think of that from a site-wide perspective and every image you have on your website, if you can get an 80% compression average, then you are going to save a hell of a lot of time on your page speed. You're going to rank a lot higher, you're going to drive more traffic, and you're going to drive more leads and revenue. Simple as that. One extra point I just want to add on to this as well, that's slightly outside of page speed, is something that people often forget when looking at images and other multimedia, is adding alt tags. Now, what an alt tag is, it is just simply a description around what the image is. Now, you want to make this as simplistic as possible. So an image should be really simply tagged up with an alt tag. So if it's a red shoe, make sure you put red shoe. If it's a graph on-page SEO, make sure you put colored graph on-page SEO. Have some really strong keywords in there that visually really describe what you're discussing, because crawlers can't look at an image. They need to be able to read the alt tag to know where to serve this image, and that is why it's critical. Now, for example, in Search Console, you can actually review traffic you're getting through from your images. So you could change your alt tags and then actually review if those images are then driving more performance just by simply describing it in a better way. Next, we move on to iframes. Now, you may not know exactly what an iframe is, but essentially what it is, it's a third-party piece of code that injects an enhancement onto one of your pages. You will have 100% used them on lots of different websites. A good example is if you're looking for a location, if you are staying at a hotel or traveling somewhere, Google Maps tends to be injected via an iframe when you get the kind of Google Maps on the page, rather than making you click out of the website and into Google itself. Now, this is where the benefit of an iframe comes in, because essentially you can inject that enhancement onto your page without ever having the user leave your website. And that's obviously critical, because we want to keep them on the website as long as possible, clicking on as many pages as possible, and then ultimately, hopefully, leading to lead generation or conversion at the end. There's various different things you can use iframes for. Common ones tend to be videos, contact us forms, and maps, like I've just said earlier. And what it also does is really supports that page speed, which I mentioned slightly earlier with the images. So by building your own sort of large video and inserting in there, or form or map, you're really going to impact your page speed, because that is going to be the main concept of what the page has to render. Well, if you use an iframe, it takes up far less space, far less time, and essentially will allow the other elements and components of your page to load a lot faster, which again, as we mentioned earlier, is now a pretty critical ranking factor and will improve your ranking position. So really, really useful to know what iframes are, how to use them, how to implement them. But there are a number of drawbacks. So don't try and insert everything into an iframe, because essentially it's not going to work and your pages aren't going to rank in the way that you'd like them to. So the first drawback is they're very difficult to track. Now, that's because you're using a third-party piece of code. You can't make changes to it. You can't get some of the information, and therefore you can't tag that up in ways that you want to track that information. So, for example, a contact us form could be difficult to track, and therefore you wouldn't get the results of the user who's actually trying to contact you. Therefore, it becomes a little bit redundant. So sometimes you have to set that up in certain ways by paying for third parties or using the form as a primary bit of data and not using it in an iframe. The also other impact for iframes is that they can't be crawled like a piece of content can be. So Google can't really understand what's in the iframe. So therefore, we always say that any primary content needs to be served on the page in content. You should not have it in the iframe, because we need Google to be able to crawl it to serve you for those relevant keywords that you've got included in the content. And finally, I know we talked about not putting everything in an iframe, but if you do have lots of things in it, then a good way around that is to transcribe your media. So what that would be is you may have a video or a podcast series or something that is maybe spoken word that you think is really, really valuable information and is much easier for a user to digest via a multimedia option. What we do then is transcribe that afterwards. So essentially, you'd set up its own landing page, insert the iframe with the multimedia in there, and then transcribe the content after that. That's just so that Google can then crawl that content and understand what is being said in said piece of multimedia. A couple of benefits of that is that the keywords then can rank that are based out of the multimedia in the content. So again, you'll be ranking for more keywords, driving more traffic. It's easier to obtain and give out external and internal links. When you have content, you have that anchor text there and ready to go. So then you can then pass that authority to different parts of your own website, link out if you really need to, or also obtain links, because people don't tend to give external links just to a video. They like to have that content there as well when you're link building and doing things with digital PR, for example. The videos can be transcribed into blogs and articles. And as we know, informational search tends to make up a very large number of searches. It's far higher than conversions. So having really relevant blog articles is always going to be good for a website, because that's what most people click through on. That's where most people digest their information, and that's when they make a decision if they're going to convert with you or not. So having that information in a blog and an article somewhere on this website will help you drive more people to your website. And also you can link through then to products and service pages, so you get that nice relevant journey that users like, and again that will lead to more conversion. And finally, it supports a little bit what George was saying earlier around multilingual SEO. So you might have a podcast or a video in English. There's absolutely no reason why you can't transcribe that into different languages on different landing pages. It means that you're opening your products up to various different markets, which is going to drive a hell of a lot more traffic and again more leads or revenue. The next section I'm just going to take you guys through is the use of internal search. Now, what this is essentially, whenever you've ever created content, you tend to use third-party information, i.e. you might use Keyword Planner. SEMrush has a keyword research option. Ahrefs has another. Whatever SEO tools you may use internally, they will have that third-party information that will tell you kind of search volumes and various different keywords that you might want to use. But one thing that people often kind of forget about is the use of internal search. Now, what that is when people search in your search bar on your website, that information can be tracked, and you can store that information and learn how people want to ask questions on your website, which is valuable information. This can be set up in Google Analytics. It's a very quick fix. It's very easy to set up and very easy to digest the information. And what it'll do is provide you with gaps in your content, i.e. things that people are searching for that they can't find on the site. It'll offer you questions on why users aren't converting, i.e. they'll ask certain questions in there about products. Weak points in your website's navigation. So obviously, if they're using the search bar, they've failed to use the navigation. The navigation hasn't taken them to the place they require. So again, it could give you some suggestions on how to improve that. And identifying new keywords as well. An always-on keyword strategy is best. You should never just have a bank of keywords. You should always be looking for more. So this will also help that. So why do we use internal search and why the primary data is important? So most internal search will be informational searches. It will be questions. So what that means is that you'll often get something from a user that just means that they want more information on one of your products, which is really, really good, because then that allows us to either create really relevant blog articles or FAQs, which could then really trigger rich snippets such as answer boxes and PAAs. So you get a nice content plan, and you also get that opportunity to rank really high in Google by hitting those rich snippets. It also supports things outside of SEO as well. So you might get information on why people don't want to convert, i.e., why does the product not have this? Why does it not have this guarantee? Why is this service not included? This is valuable information for your business that you could then make a decision moving forward if you need to adapt a product or change the way it works. Also, internal search, as I said, can also find new keywords for yourself. A great example I always put in my decks is that 3 years ago, COVID-19 had a search volume of 0. It now has around 300,000 searches a month in the UK, and I think that's quite a conservative number. That's probably higher. So, for example, there is a demand that can be created, and that's why it's important to always be thinking, what are my users searching, and is it going to boom in the next sort of quarter, year, or even longer? Now, moving forward, internal search can also really support revenue and your conversion rate. Now, because you're getting this primary data of what users want, you can then essentially make those changes to provide the user what they need, and that will lead to further conversions. So a good one we always like to do is take this information and place those into FAQs on your product or service pages. So that means that the user finds all this nice information in one place where they can convert. Now, the only caveat with that, as we just said, that it must be kind of organic. Don't just shoehorn in questions and FAQs to try and make the page deem more suitable for a user, because Google will kind of know what you're doing and penalize you for that. It's just about making sure that you have really, really relevant content on the site. Again, I'll mention it earlier, it could also tell you more about information about your products. So, for example, if you don't offer something that a user really wants, this will tell you. And again, you can then make a decision, should we be offering that, or do we need to refine the product a little bit? And not only can we do this from a sort of website level where you get this information, this can be broken down page by page. So over a long-term strategy, you could actually make decisions about your own products, product by product, learning about what the user wants and what they need. Now, you probably order this in a sort of CPA order, i.e. go for the most expensive products and work backwards to make sure you make as much money as possible. But yeah, over that long-term strategy, you really can make improvements to your products and really give users what they want. And finally, just how internal search can improve your site navigation. So what we mean by this is, why has a user had to use the search bar in the first place? What is your main navigation missing that it should include? So this often points out weaknesses in your products and content groupings, i.e. you might have too thin a subfolder or too little. So it kind of goes back to what George was mentioning about JD versus ASOS. Do you need to break it down by like Air Max, or do you just have clothes and trainers? You have to really find that relevant search term that your users want to land on. It can point out missing pages. So, for example, if there's really, really prominent in a search bar that someone's searching something that you don't have on the website, it would be obviously relevant to add in that article level page that would then link back to somewhere else on the site that again would lead to conversion. And it could also actually make improvements to your main navigation bar. Now, you can't have every page in the main navigation, but if you're missing one that's really, really key that a lot of people are looking for, then you need to make that change and include it, because you want to drive as much traffic as possible. So yeah, we'll just talk about crawl budget. And what crawl budget is essentially how much Google crawls your website. Now, some people think that Google crawls every page of your website every single day. It's not true. It picks up a average a day. There's no set number. It does it kind of specific to your website. What it does, it moves through the website, reads that content, and then kind of re-ranks you to understand if you should be outranking your competitors or not. This happens hopefully daily, but what we like to do is kind of force that indexation in Google Search Console, and by using relevant sitemaps to try and make Google crawl as much as possible to serve as many pages as possible on Google and say improve those rankings. What it also does is it crawls your robots.txt file as an initial point of contact, and that is where you can block out certain pages. So, for example, if you have basket pages that you don't want to appear, or things behind paid walls, for example, we can block those out so Google knows not to crawl them and doesn't serve them in Google, which is where we don't want it to be, because obviously we want users to have that really solid journey. Moving on, keyword selection and cannibalization. Now, this is a real problem for legacy content because you've probably forgotten the content you wrote 4 years ago and try and then rank for the same keywords or have very similar articles, which then begin to compete with each other. The biggest issue with that is Google then gets very confused on which page to serve, and the older page tends to have built authority over the longer period of time, meaning that you might have an article from 2017 really outranking your new, really good article that was created in 2022. Again, then you're providing users a really bad experience because you're providing them out-of-date information, which is not what we want to do. So what we'd like to do when we do these kind of keyword selections, cannibalization, is review the legacy content, do an audit across everything you've created, and then understand what keywords those pages are ranking for. We can then look for longer term phrases, adapt the content, or have informational and conversional versions of those keywords. So for example, if you sold trainers, let's use the JD example, you might have what are Nike Air Max trainers versus buy Nike Air Max trainers. Similar keywords, but have different intent, and you'll be served in different markets. So this is a really, really big pitfall to avoid. Make sure that you're always selecting the right keywords for the right piece of content. And finally, just about consolidating content. Now, this is something we do very regularly, especially off the back of the EAT update, which was around authority and trustworthiness of content, and the MUM update, which is coming out very soon, which is about serving the most relevant piece of content possible. Again, it's just a way of Google understanding essentially how to read like a human more and serving you the correct page. So what we would suggest doing is when you do these content audits, look for common themes. If you can see that 3 or 4 of the same keyword has been used across regular pieces of content, combine them, make a really, really strong, powerful page that's going to rank really, really well, that has lots of thick quality content, and you are definitely going to drive traffic through that. You then just build out a nice internal linking system, pass that on to the relevant pages, and that again is how you lead people from Google search straight to your products and services. So I'll pass back to yourself, Greg, there.
Cool. Thanks, Luke. So just to summarize, just to go over the key points essentially that we've covered today. So number 1, SEO needs to be at the core of any website updates, projects, or website builds. Research and the use of data available to set out the right direction from an architectural perspective. Site structure is fundamental to any successful multilingual approach, and how you structure that out. 4, navigational content can be used to harness and grow your SEO approach. 5 is multimedia can be a strong asset to help support and grow a website's authority and platform. 6 is first-party data can be used to understand what users want to help increase conversions. 7 is legacy content can impact a website's crawl budget and the indexation of key content. And number 8, put a content framework in place in line with recent Google updates, which focus on the quality over content.